It was just another ordinary morning in the small town. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a soft, golden light over the sleepy streets. The town's residents were beginning their daily routines, but for one school bus driver, this day would turn into something unforgettable. John, the bus driver, had been driving the same route for years. He knew every turn, every stop, and every child who got on and off his bus. The kids were always excited to start their school day, and John enjoyed his job. He took pride in knowing that he was responsible for getting them safely to school every morning. The bus made its usual stops, picking up the children one by one, each with their backpack slung over their shoulder and a smile on their face. As they reached the final stop of the route, things seemed to be going smoothly, just like every other day. But as John turned the corner onto the forest road that led to the school, something strange caught his eye. He slowed the bus, unsure of what he was seeing. In the distance, just ahead of the bus, two large German Shepherd police dogs stood perfectly still in the middle of the road. John blinked, thinking it was a strange coincidence, but as he got closer, it became clear that the dogs weren't moving. They stood side by side, blocking the way, their eyes locked forward, watching the bus approach. John's first instinct was to honk the horn, so he did. "Come on, move," he muttered under his breath, but the dogs didn't budge. He honked again, a little louder this time, but still, the dogs remained motionless. It was as if they hadn't even heard him. Their stance was strong, unwavering, like sentinels guarding the road. A wave of confusion washed over John. He glanced around, trying to figure out what was going on. The fog was thick this morning, and the trees on either side of the road were tall and dense, creating an eerie atmosphere. But the dogs weren't acting like any normal animals. They weren't chasing anything, and they didn't seem to be playing. They were there for a reason, and that reason was beginning to stir a sense of unease in John. He stepped out of the bus, his boots crunching on the wet asphalt as he moved toward the dogs. "What are you two doing here?" He called out softly, hoping the dogs would respond. But they remained still, their attention fixed on the road ahead. John had seen police dogs on his route before, but they were always on duty with their handlers. These dogs, however, were alone, and there was no sign of any officers nearby. He felt a sense of mystery surround him as he walked closer. The dogs didn't seem aggressive. They weren't growling or barking. Instead, they stood with an almost unnatural calmness, their ears perked and their eyes sharp. John tried to approach them cautiously, but as he got closer, the dogs moved slightly, positioning themselves to block his path. It was as if they were protecting something or someone. A sudden chill ran down John's spine, and he began to question if this was just a coincidence. He turned back to the bus, looking at the children who were now peering through the windows, their eyes wide with curiosity. "What's going on?" one of the children asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm not sure," John replied, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Just stay inside the bus, okay? I'll figure this out." As he stood there, trying to make sense of the situation, his eyes darted back to the dogs. They were still standing firm, their presence growing more commanding with every passing second. The silence around them was almost deafening. The fog seemed to get thicker, wrapping the scene in a sense of mystery and tension. John knew he had to make a decision. He could try to drive around the dogs, but that might be dangerous. He could try to get back in the bus and drive away. But something told him that the dogs weren't just standing in the road for no reason. There was something more to this situation, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. His instincts told him to stay put and wait. As he looked into the eyes of the dogs, he felt a deep sense of respect and awe. There was something powerful about them, something that made him realize that they weren't just blocking the bus for no reason. The mystery of the situation was only just beginning to unfold. John stood frozen, staring at the two German shepherds. His heart raced as the fog seemed to thicken around them, making the moment feel even more surreal. The dogs didn't move, not even a twitch of their ears. They were still and silent, their eyes locked on the road ahead. John's mind was racing, trying to make sense of the situation. Why were they here? Why wouldn't they move? He turned back to the bus and looked at the children, still peering out the windows, their faces full of confusion and curiosity. They had all been quiet until now, but the tension was starting to build, and John could see the concern in their eyes. He didn't want them to be scared, but he wasn't sure what was going on either. He had to figure this out. As John took a step forward, one of the dogs, the larger of the two, shifted slightly, its eyes never leaving the horizon. John stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively reaching for his radio. He called into dispatch, his voice steady, but tinged with uncertainty. "Dispatch, this is John on Route 42. I've got a situation here. 2 police dogs are blocking my path. No officers around. Can you confirm if they're on duty?" There was a brief silence before the dispatcher responded. "We don't have any reports of K9 units in the area right now. Can you give me a description of the dogs?" John described the dogs as best as he could. 2 strong, alert German shepherds, both in perfect health. The dispatcher asked him to stay put and wait for instructions. But John wasn't sure if waiting was the right choice. The longer he stood there, the more he felt that something was off. He glanced at the road ahead again, wondering if he was missing something. There was no sign of any other vehicles or people. The road was eerily quiet. He looked to his left and right, where the trees stood tall and motionless, their shadows stretching long in the early morning light. Everything seemed normal, except for the 2 dogs in front of him. A sudden rustling sound came from the woods to the right. John's heart skipped a beat as his eyes snapped in that direction. For a split second, he thought he saw something. Something moving just beyond the trees. It was gone almost as quickly as it appeared, but the feeling that something was out there lingered. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The dogs, however, didn't react to the sound. They remained as still as ever, seemingly unaware or uninterested in the rustling noise. John tried to push the thought out of his mind, but the sensation of something being off grew stronger with every passing second. He took a few cautious steps toward the dogs, wondering if he could somehow coax them to move. "Hey, boys," he called softly, his voice calm and reassuring. "What's the matter with you two? Is something wrong?" But the dogs didn't budge. They didn't even look at him. It was like they were waiting for something or someone. John's gut told him this wasn't just a random occurrence. These dogs weren't acting on instinct alone. There was something intentional about their behavior, something deeper that he wasn't seeing yet. As John stood there, trying to make sense of it all, a low hum filled the air. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, like the distant sound of an engine. John squinted into the fog, his mind racing. Was it a car? A truck? Or something else? The hum was getting closer, but there was still no sign of the source. John's heart rate quickened. His thoughts turned to the worst-case scenario. Was someone in danger? Were the dogs guarding the road for a reason? Was there a threat they were protecting everyone from? He looked back at the bus. The children were still watching, their eyes wide with curiosity. But now there was a sense of concern in their expressions. John didn't want to scare them, but he knew something had to be done. He needed answers. He stepped back toward the bus, his eyes still locked on the dogs. That was when he noticed it, something that he hadn't seen before. The dogs, while they stood still, had their ears slightly tilted back. They were on high alert. It was a subtle change, but it was enough for John to realize that something was coming. The hum was now unmistakable, growing louder by the second. John's heart pounded in his chest as he turned his attention to the trees once more. There was something happening here, something bigger than he had imagined. And whatever it was, the dogs were ready for it. Just then, the radio crackled to life again. The dispatcher's voice came through, but this time, there was an urgency in her tone. "John, hold your position. We've just received reports of a suspect in the area. Stay alert." The mystery was deepening. John's heart raced as the dispatcher's words echoed in his ears. "We've just received reports of a suspect in the area. Stay alert." He stood frozen, the fog around him thickening with each passing second. The police dogs remained still in front of the bus, their focus unwavering, their bodies tense. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment. His mind was spinning. A suspect. In the area. But there was no sign of anyone. No vehicles. No other people. Nothing. The woods were eerily quiet, and the road ahead was empty, save for the 2 German shepherds blocking his path. But something told him this wasn't just a coincidence. These dogs were here for a reason, and it had to be tied to whatever danger lurked nearby. John's eyes darted back to the trees, straining to see through the dense fog. He stepped closer to the dogs, his boots crunching on the wet road, trying to get a better sense of what was happening. His thoughts raced as he considered the possibilities. Could it be a fugitive on the run? Was the person hiding in the woods, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio again, breaking his thoughts. "John, do you have visual contact with the dogs? Are they acting normally?" "They won't move," John replied, his voice steady but filled with unease. "They're blocking the road, but they're not being aggressive. It's like they're waiting for something or someone." There was a pause on the other end of the radio before the dispatcher spoke again. "We've had reports of a person of interest in the area, a man who's been known to avoid capture. He's been spotted near the school grounds, and there's a chance he could be hiding somewhere along that road. The dogs are most likely aware of him." John felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard about fugitive cases before, but this was different. He had no idea the situation was so serious. The dogs weren't just protecting the school bus. They were on high alert, guarding against something much bigger than he had realized. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The dogs' behavior, the way they refused to move, their alertness, it wasn't just a random act of stubbornness. They had sensed the threat before anyone else. They had a job to do, and they were going to do it no matter what. John scanned the road ahead, his eyes now sharp with focus. The trees on either side of the road seemed to loom larger, casting long shadows in the fog. He felt an unsettling sense of danger in the air, but still, there was no sign of the suspect. Could the dogs really sense him that far away? Or was he already nearby, lurking just beyond the tree line, waiting for the perfect moment to make a move? The hum in the air had grown louder again, almost like the sound of an engine, but it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The fog distorted everything, making it difficult to judge distances. John's mind raced with the possibilities. If the suspect was near, they needed to act fast. But what if he was armed? What if the situation turned violent? John glanced back at the bus. The children were still inside, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. He could feel their curiosity and fear from here. He had to protect them. He had to do whatever it took to keep them safe. As he turned back to the dogs, he noticed a subtle change in their posture. The larger dog, the one closest to the bus, raised its head slightly, its ears twitching in response to a sound that only it seemed to hear. John followed its gaze, and for the first time, he saw movement in the trees. A figure, a shadow. It was fleeting, but it was there. John's pulse quickened as the dogs stiffened, their bodies becoming even more alert. The larger dog growled low in its throat, the sound a warning to anyone who might be nearby. The smaller dog, on the other hand, moved a little closer to the bus, its eyes scanning the area with incredible precision. The dogs were working together, communicating without words, anticipating the threat before it even made itself known. John took a step back, realizing that the suspect was close. He quickly radioed in to dispatch again. "We've got movement. It's coming from the woods. I can't see them clearly, but the dogs are definitely aware of something." The dispatcher's voice responded with urgency. "Stay put, John. The backup is on the way. We're sending more officers to assist. Keep your distance, and keep those kids safe. Don't engage the suspect." The tension in the air was unbearable. John could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him. He had no idea how close the danger was, but he knew one thing for sure: the dogs were right. They were protecting the bus for a reason, and whatever was lurking in the fog wasn't something to be taken lightly. The mystery had deepened. The stakes were higher than ever. And as the dogs continued to stand firm in front of the bus, John realized that this was no ordinary morning. The danger was real, and the dogs were about to play a crucial role in stopping it. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. The fog had thickened, creating an eerie silence around the school bus and the two police dogs standing firm in front. John could feel his pulse racing as he tried to make sense of the growing sense of danger. The larger German shepherd's low growl echoed through the stillness of the morning, its eyes scanning the trees with laser-like focus. The smaller dog stood beside it, equally alert, its body tense and ready. John's hand gripped the radio, his knuckles white. "Dispatch, the suspect is near. The dogs are sensing him. We need backup immediately," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The dispatcher responded quickly, her tone sharp. "Backup is on the way, John. We've sent officers to your location. Stay put and keep the children inside the bus. Don't engage." John nodded, though he knew there was no way he could sit back and do nothing. The dogs were already doing everything they could. They were prepared for whatever was coming, but the feeling of danger lingered, growing with every passing second. The fog parted slightly, revealing a shadow in the distance, a figure moving cautiously through the trees. John's heart skipped a beat. The man was dressed in dark clothing, his movements deliberate and careful. He was trying to remain unseen, but the dogs knew exactly where he was. Without hesitation, the larger dog took a step forward, its posture proud and strong. The smaller dog mirrored its actions, positioning itself to protect the bus and its passengers. Their teamwork was flawless. They were ready to face whatever came next, and John had never been prouder of these canines. The suspect, still hidden in the trees, seemed to sense the dog's readiness. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. But before he could make a move, the sound of approaching sirens broke through the quiet. The backup had arrived. The flashing lights of patrol cars cut through the fog, and the sound of multiple officers' footsteps grew louder as they neared the bus. The man, realizing he had no way out, turned and bolted, disappearing back into the trees. But the dogs were not fooled. In an instant, they surged forward, their instincts guiding them as they chased after the suspect. John's heart pounded as he watched the heroic duo spring into action. He had never seen them move with such speed and precision. They were determined to stop this man, and nothing was going to stand in their way. Within moments, the officers caught up to the scene. They had been briefed on the situation and knew exactly where to go. The dogs had done their job. They had cornered the suspect before he could make it any further into the woods. The officers quickly apprehended him, securing him in handcuffs as the dogs circled, still alert, making sure there were no surprises. John watched the entire scene unfold, a mixture of awe and relief filling him. The danger had passed, and the children on the bus, who had been watching in silence, erupted into cheers. They had seen the dog's bravery firsthand, and they understood that they had just witnessed something truly extraordinary. The officer in charge approached the bus, his face filled with gratitude and admiration. "Great job, John," he said, smiling. "Those dogs are true heroes." John nodded, his gaze shifting to the two German shepherds, who had now returned to the bus, their tails wagging slightly in a rare show of affection. They had completed their mission, and they had done it flawlessly. The suspect had been captured, and the children were safe, all thanks to the bravery and instincts of these incredible K9 officers. One of the children on the bus, a young girl, leaned out the window and called out to the dogs. "Thank you, dogs," she shouted, her voice filled with excitement. The larger German shepherd looked up at her, its eyes softening for just a moment, as if acknowledging the praise. It was a small, simple gesture, but it was enough. John smiled to himself. These dogs didn't seek attention or recognition. They did what they did because it was their duty. And they did it with unwavering courage. As the officers escorted the suspect away, John stood there, taking in the moment. The fog was beginning to lift, and the sun's rays pierced through the trees, casting a warm glow on the scene. The kids on the bus were still talking excitedly about what had just happened, but John couldn't shake the feeling of pride that filled him. It wasn't just about what the dogs had done. It was about the bond between them and the people they protected. These canines weren't just animals. They were partners, heroes in their own right. The story of the brave police dogs would spread throughout the town, inspiring everyone who heard it. They would remember how, in the face of danger, these dogs stood firm, not only to protect the children on the bus, but to make sure the community stayed safe. In that moment, the dogs had shown what true loyalty and heroism meant. As the school bus continued on its way, the children chattered happily, their excitement still buzzing in the air. But for John, there was only one thought that filled his mind. He would never forget the bravery of those two police dogs. They had saved the day in the most remarkable way, and their courage would live on in the hearts of everyone who witnessed it.